Genesis 31. Jacob runs away from Laban. Jacob heard that Laban's sons were complaining about him. They were saying, "Jacob has taken everything that belonged to our father. He has taken things from our father and he has become rich himself." And Jacob could see that Laban was not as nice to him as he had been before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, "Go back to the land where your father and grandfather lived. Go back to your relatives. I will be with you there." Jacob sent a message to Rachel and Leah. He said that they must come to the field where he was taking care of his animals. Jacob said to Rachel and Leah, "I see that your father is not as nice to me now, as he was before. But the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have worked very hard for your father. I have worked as well as I can. But your father has cheated me many times. He has changed what I receive for my work at least times. But God has not let him hurt me." Sometimes Laban said, "I will pay you with the animals that have different colors on their skin." If he said that, all the animals gave birth to babies with different colors on their skins. Sometimes he said, "I will pay you with the animals that have marks on them." Then all the animals would give birth to babies with marks on them. In this way God took away your father's animals, and he gave them to me. One night I had a dream. It was at the time when the animals were becoming pregnant. In the dream, I saw that the male goats had marks and different colors on their skin. The angel of God spoke to me in the dream. He said, "Jacob." I replied, "Yes, here I am." The angel said, "Look carefully. See all the male goats that are having sex with the female goats. They all have marks and different colors on their skin. I am helping you because I have seen the bad things that Laban has done to you. I am the God who appeared to you at Bethel. That is where you poured oil on the special stone and you made a promise to me. Now I am telling you to leave this land. Go back to the land where you were born." When Jacob told that to Rachel and Leah, they replied, "Our father will not give us anything more when he dies. He now thinks of us as if we are foreign people. You worked hard for him so that we could become your wives. He has cheated us as well as you. So everything that God has taken away from our father really belongs to us, and to our children. So you must do everything that God has told you to do." So Jacob put his children and wives on his camels. He put together all his animals, and everything that he had received in Paddan Aram. He took them with him to go to the land of Canaan. He left to go back to his father Isaac. Before they left, Laban had gone to cut the wool from his sheep. While he was away from the house, Rachel took the idols that Laban worshipped in his house. These idols were small gods that someone made from wood or metal. Laban worshipped these gods. Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean. He did not tell Laban that he was going away. Jacob went away quickly and he took all his things. He went across the Euphrates River. He went towards the hill country of Gilead. After 3 days, someone told Laban that Jacob had gone away. So Laban took his relatives with him and he followed Jacob. After 7 days he found him in the hill country of Gilead. Then God appeared to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night. God warned him, "Be careful what you say to Jacob. Do not say anything good or bad against him." Jacob had put up his tent in the hill country of Gilead. That is where Laban found him. So Laban and his relatives also put up their tents in that place. Laban said to Jacob, "Why did you do that? You have deceived me. You have taken my daughters away as if you had caught them in a war. Why did you go away secretly? Yes, you have deceived me. You should have told me that you were leaving. Then I would have prepared a big meal. We would have been happy together, with songs and music. But you did not even let me say goodbye to my daughters or my grandchildren. What you have done is not right. I have the power to hurt you. But last night the God of your father appeared to me. He told me, 'Be careful what you say to Jacob. Do not say anything good or bad against him. I know that you want very much to return to your father's house. That is why you have left my home. "But why did you take my idols?" Jacob replied, "I left secretly because I was afraid. I thought that you might fight me to take your daughters away from me. But if you find your idols with anyone here, that person must die. While our relatives watch, you may look for anything that belongs to you. If you find anything, then take it." Jacob did not know that Rachel had taken her father's idols. So Laban went into Jacob's tent. Then he went into Leah's tent. He also went into the female servant's tent. But he did not find the idols. When he left Leah's tent, he went into Rachel's tent. Rachel had taken the idols and she had put them inside her camel's seat. Now she sat on them. Laban looked everywhere in Rachel's tent, but he did not find the idols. Rachel said to him, "Do not be angry with me, sir. I cannot stand up in front of you. It is the time of my monthly blood loss." So Laban looked everywhere for the idols, but he did not find them. In Old Testament times, when a woman had her monthly blood loss, she was unclean. And anything that she sat on was unclean. See Leviticus 15:20. Then Jacob became angry and he quarreled with Laban. He asked Laban, "What have I done wrong? What sin have I done against you so that you had to catch me? Now you have looked through everything that I have. Did you find anything that belongs to you? If you have found anything, put it here in the open. Then your relatives and my relatives can see it. Our relatives can decide which of us is right, you or me." Jacob continued to say to Laban, "I have worked for you for 20 years. Your female sheep and goats have all safely given birth to young ones. I have not taken any of your male animals as food for myself. If wild animals attacked your sheep or goats, I did not show them to you. I myself paid you for them. If any animal was lost, in the daytime or at night, you said that I must pay you for it. This is what it was like to work for you. I worked in the strong heat of the sun in the day. I had pain from the cold at night. I could not always sleep. It was like this for years as I worked like a slave for you. I worked for years to pay you for your 2 daughters. Then I worked for 6 years for your sheep and goats. You changed what you paid me at least times. The God of my father, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac was with me. If he had not helped me, then you would have sent me away with nothing. But God has seen what you have done to hurt me. He has seen how hard I have worked for you. So last night he told you that you had done wrong. The God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac are all names for God. God is very powerful and has authority over everything." Laban replied to Jacob, "These women are my daughters. Their children are my grandchildren. The animals are my animals. Everything that you have with you here belongs to me. But there is nothing that I can do today about my daughters or about their children. So we should be friends. Let us make an agreement together. It will show that we have agreed to be friends." So Jacob took a large stone and made it stand up in the ground. He said to his relatives, "Go and get some stones." So they brought some stones and they put them together on the ground. Then they all ate a meal together, near the heap of stones. When people made a promise, they often ate a meal together. Laban called that place Jegar-Sahadutha. Jacob called it Galeed. Jegar-Sahadutha are Aramaic words. Galeed is a Hebrew word. Both mean that the stones showed that people made an agreement there. Laban said, "These stones show that we have made an agreement today." That is why the place was called Galeed. The place was also called Mizpah. That was because Laban said, "May the Lord watch you and me when we are away from each other. Remember that God is watching you. If you do wrong to my daughters, God will see it. And if you marry any other women, remember this. God is watching you. Even if no one else sees you, God will know." Laban also said, "I have put this special stone here, and the heap of stones near it. They stand there between your land and my land. I will not go past the stones to your side to hurt you. And you must not go past them to my side to hurt me." Let the God of Abraham, Nahor, and their ancestors decide if one of us is guilty." So Jacob made a promise in the name of the God that his father Isaac worshipped. He offered a sacrifice to God there in the hill country. He asked his relatives to eat a meal with him. After they had eaten, they stayed the night there. Early the next morning, Laban got up to return home. He kissed his grandchildren and his daughters. He said goodbye and he blessed them. Then he left and he went back to his home. Jacob ran away from Laban because he was afraid. But God had already told Jacob that he would be with him. Jacob should have trusted God to keep him safe. Jacob had worked very hard for Laban. But Laban and his sons did not respect Jacob. Laban continued to cheat and he did not pay fair wages to Jacob. And Laban's sons were starting to accuse Jacob. They said that Jacob stole his wealth from Laban. This was not true. In fact, Jacob had become wealthy. But it was God who made Jacob wealthy. In the end, God told Jacob to leave Laban. Jacob did not delay. He took his family and his animals. Jacob did not tell anyone else that his family were leaving. They did not even say goodbye to Laban. After 3 days, Laban heard that Jacob had left. Laban gathered his relatives to chase Jacob. We do not know what Laban intended to do to Jacob. Probably Laban wanted to take back his daughters and the animals. But, that night, God warned Laban in a dream. So, God was protecting Jacob. On the next day, Laban and Jacob met. They argued with each other. But Laban was careful about his words, because God had warned him. Laban and Jacob decided to make a covenant. But this covenant was not an agreement of friendship. Instead, they promised to stay apart. Then, their sons would not fight each other. Notes on the verses. Verse 1: Laban was getting old. Laban's sons were now adults. The sons were afraid that they would not receive Laban's wealth. They were afraid that Jacob might get it. But they were accusing Jacob of something that was not true. Jacob never stole Laban's wealth. In fact, Laban became wealthy because Jacob was working for Laban. Genesis 30:27. And now God had made Jacob wealthy too. Verse 2: Everyone knew that Laban did not like Jacob. That was because Jacob had become very rich. And Laban was jealous. Verse 3: Jacob had a good reason to go away. Also, God had ordered him to go. In the Hebrew text, the writer says that Laban had turned his face away from Jacob. It means that Laban did not like Jacob. But God had turned his own face towards Jacob. He was looking after Jacob. Verse 4: Jacob wanted his wives to go with him. He did not want them to stay with Laban. He wanted to be sure about that. Jacob and his wives met together in a field. From that, we learn that they were just part of Laban's household. They did not have their own home where they could be alone and safe. Jacob did not force his wives to leave Laban. Jacob allowed them to choose. Verses 5-6: Jacob knew that God had helped him. And Jacob was grateful. Verse 7: 10 times may be a way to say many times. Verse 8: It seems that the story in Genesis 30:25-43 was just an example of Jacob's problems with Laban. In fact, Laban changed Jacob's wages many times. Laban was not an honest employer. Verse 9: In the Hebrew text, the writer says this: God has rescued your father's animals. Verses 10-12: God was guiding Jacob. An angel spoke to Jacob during the dream. Verse 13: At Bethel, Jacob had made a promise to God. Jacob would obey God if God looked after him. Here, God is reminding him about that promise. Jacob should do as he had promised. Verse 14: Leah and Rachel believed that Laban had cheated them. They were his daughters. But he seemed to act as if they were strangers. A husband usually paid bride money to his bride's father. It was like a payment to get the bride. The father usually kept that money. But Jacob had no money. Instead, he worked for the father as a payment. Leah and Rachel thought that they should receive money from their father Laban. They thought that because their husband Jacob had worked for him. Verse 15, Laban was behaving towards his daughters as if they were the wives of a slave. Daughters did not inherit from their father. Only sons inherited. But Laban had not given the right wages to Jacob. In that way, he had cheated Jacob. So he had cheated Jacob's wives and family also. Verse 16, Rachel and Leah thought that they could take their father's wealth. Rachel even stole something. Verse 19. But, in fact, God had not given Laban's wealth to them. Really, God had given to Jacob his own wealth. Verse 18, Jacob had come to Laban alone. Jacob had come without anything. The story shows how God had blessed Jacob. God had given a lot of wealth to Jacob. God had promised to do that. He had also done that to Abraham and Isaac. Verse 19, Laban was probably a fairly long distance away from home. When people cut the wool off sheep, it was a very important occasion. There was often a feast at that time. The gods that Rachel took from the household were probably small idols. Families worshipped them. They thought that the idols protected them. The idols might have been images that were like ancestors. We do not know why Rachel stole them. Perhaps the person that had them had a right to the family's property. Perhaps she thought that the idols would protect her during the journey. Perhaps she liked the idols. Maybe Rachel just wanted to have something from home. Or maybe she wanted to make her father angry. People in the Bible often had idols. They did not always realize that idols are false gods. So they did not always realize that it is wrong to have idols. But God's command was that people should not make idols. Deuteronomy 5:8. We should only serve the real God. Deuteronomy 5:7. Verses 20 to 21, Jacob and his family left in secret. Laban did not discover until 3 days afterwards. Verses 22 to 23, Laban and his relatives followed Jacob. But Laban traveled faster than Jacob. Unlike Jacob, Laban did not have children and animals to look after as he traveled. So, Laban soon caught up with Jacob. Verse 24, God told Laban to agree with Jacob always. In the Hebrew text, God says this to Laban, say not a word to Jacob either good or bad. In other words, do not encourage Jacob to return. And do not force him. Verse 26, Jacob did not owe anything to Laban. Laban wanted to keep Jacob. That was because Jacob was a good worker. And God was blessing what Jacob did. Masters did not let slaves take away wives and families. But Jacob had worked hard to get his wives. He was Laban's nephew. He was not a slave. Verses 27 to 28, Laban was unhappy that Jacob had left in secret. But Laban pretended that he was happy for Jacob to leave. This was probably not true. It seems that Laban did not really care about his daughters. They had complained that he was unfair to them in verses 14 to 16. Verses 29 to 30, Laban knew that the real God had spoken to him. But Laban still wanted Jacob to return Laban's idols, false gods. Perhaps the idols were gold. So, they were valuable. Jacob did not know who stole them. Verse 32, the writer writes in a very clever way here. We know that Rachel stole the gods from the household at the beginning. And the writer makes us wonder whether Laban will find the idols. We wonder what will happen. But we have to wait for a while before we can know that. Verses 33 to 34, Laban looked for his idols. Nobody expected that Rachel would steal anything. So Laban looked in the other tents first. Verse 35, Rachel was not very gentle with the idols here. She was sitting on them. Verses 38 to 40, Jacob's and Laban's argument sounds like the discussions in a court. Laban accused Jacob. But Laban could not prove anything. Now Jacob accused Laban. Of course, there was no human judge. God was their only judge. Verse 41, 10 times may not mean the exact number 10. It may mean many times. Verse 42, in the Hebrew text, Jacob calls God the fear of Isaac. It can mean the God whom Isaac respected very greatly. And he was the God whom Isaac obeyed. It can also mean the God who makes people afraid. Jacob spoke to Laban very clearly. Jacob said that God was blessing him. He said that God was watching him so that God could protect him. And Jacob said that God had already acted as their judge. God had already spoken to Laban. And God had told Laban what to do. Verse 43, Laban was not willing to give in to Jacob. But Laban knew that Laban could not win against God. Verses 45 to 46, when people made covenants, they sometimes built a heap of stones. So, when people saw the stones, they would remember about the covenant. Verses 47 to 49, the name that Laban called the stones was in his language. And the name that Jacob called them was in Jacob's language. Both names mean heap of witness. The heap was like a witness. A witness gives evidence. And the heap was evidence that those men had made the covenant. Mizpah means watchpost, a place where a guard is watching. Verse 50, Jacob had to promise not to marry any more wives. Verses 51 to 52, the purpose of the heap of stones was to separate Jacob's descendants from Laban's descendants. Then, they would not fight. Verse 53, Laban talked about Abraham's God. Laban also talked about Nahor's God and their father's God. Maybe Laban meant that all those men had the same God. Or he might have meant that Nahor and the father did not have the same God as Abraham did. Look at Joshua 24:2, 14, 15. Abraham worshipped the one real God. And Jacob called only the one real God, the God of his father Isaac, as his witness. Verse 54, the writer does not tell us whether Laban was also offering the sacrifice together with Jacob. Verse 55, when Laban first met Jacob, Laban was very friendly to him. But when Laban said goodbye to Jacob, Laban was less friendly to him. Genesis 32. Jacob's journey home. Jacob continued on his journey to his father's house. On his way, the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is where God's army has put up their tents." So he called that place Mahanaim. Jacob had seen the angels of God before. See Genesis 28:12. Now God sent his angels to meet Jacob again, to show that he was with Jacob. Jacob sent men with a message to his brother Esau. Esau was living in the land of Seir, also called Edom. Jacob told his men, "This is what you must say to my master Esau, your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban until now. I have cows, donkeys, sheep, and goats. I have male and female servants. Now I am sending this message to my lord so that you will be happy with me." When the men returned, they said to Jacob, "We went to your brother Esau. Now he is coming to meet you and he has 400 men with him." Jacob was very frightened and upset when he heard this. So he separated his people into two groups. He also separated his animals. He thought, if Esau attacks one group, the other group may run away safely. Then Jacob prayed, "God of my grandfather Abraham and my father Isaac, Lord, you said to me, go back to your country and to your relatives. I will do good things for you there. You have always loved me. You have continued to be kind to me. I am not worth this. When I crossed the Jordan River to go to Haran, I only had my stick. But now I can make two big groups of people and animals. I pray that you will save me from the power of my brother Esau. I am afraid that he will come and attack me. He may also attack my family. But you have said, I will give you many good things. I will give you so many descendants that nobody will be able to count them. They will be as much as the sand on the shore of the sea." Genesis 28:14. Jacob stayed in that place for the night. He chose some of his animals as a gift for Esau. He chose 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 female sheep and 20 male sheep. He also chose 30 female camels, with their young ones, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. He told his servants to take care of them. He separated each group of animals from the other groups. Jacob said to his servants, "Go in front of me. Keep some space between each group of animals." He told the servant who led the first group of animals, "When my brother Esau meets you, he may ask, 'Who do you belong to? Where are you going? Who do all these animals belong to?' Then you must say, 'They belong to your servant Jacob. They are a gift that he has sent to my lord Esau. Jacob himself is coming behind us." Jacob also told the servants who led the other groups of animals, as well as the servants who followed behind them, "You are to say the same thing to Esau, when you meet him. You must also say, 'Your servant Jacob is coming behind us.'" Jacob thought, "Esau will be happy to receive my gifts. He will no longer be angry with me. Then, when I meet him, he will not hurt me." So Jacob sent the men with his gifts to go on to meet Esau. But he himself stayed in that place for the night. During the night Jacob took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants and his 11 sons to go with him. They went across the Jabbok River where there was a place to cross. After Jacob had sent his family across, he also sent all his things across the stream. Then Jacob was alone. A man came and fought with him for a long time. They continued until dawn. This part of the river Jabbok was not very deep. It was about 20 miles north of the Dead Sea. God came to Jacob as an angel. See Hosea 12, 4-5. The man saw that he was not winning the fight against Jacob. So he hit Jacob's hip while they were fighting. In that way, Jacob's hip moved out of its proper place. Then the man said to Jacob, "Now let me go because dawn has come." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked Jacob, "What is your name?" Jacob replied, "My name is Jacob." Then the man said, "Your name will not be Jacob anymore. Your name will now be Israel. That is because you have fought with God and you have fought with men. And you have won." Israel probably means he fights with God. By changing Jacob's name, God gave him a new beginning. Then Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But the man said, "Why do you want to know my name?" Then he blessed Jacob in that place. So Jacob called the place Peniel. He said, "I have seen God face to face, and I am still alive." Peniel means face of God. The sun rose in the sky as Jacob passed through Peniel. He could not walk properly because of his hip. Even today, the Israelite people do not eat the meat of an animal where it joins to the hip. This is because God touched Jacob's hip. The Israelites were the descendants of Jacob, who was now called Israel. Jacob's 12 sons became the ancestors of Israel's 12 tribes. When Jacob left Canaan, Esau was plotting to kill him. Now Jacob was returning to Canaan. And Jacob realized that he would have to meet Esau. Jacob was afraid. He thought that Esau might still be very angry. And he heard that Esau had 400 men with him. Jacob knew that his family and servants could not defeat Esau's men. Jacob made plans in case Esau's men attacked. Jacob separated his family into groups. He hoped that some would escape. And he sent his servants with gifts for Esau. Jacob hoped that the gifts would please Esau. And Jacob wanted to show that he respected Esau as his older brother. Jacob had to depend on God. If Esau was angry, only God could save Jacob. Jacob prayed for help. Jacob had a special experience in prayer. He seemed to be fighting a man. That man was probably an angel. The man was stronger than Jacob. But the man could not overcome Jacob. So, Jacob struggled with God in prayer. And Jacob continued until God blessed him. Now, Jacob was trusting God. Notes on the verses. Verse 1, Jacob met God's angels. They showed that God was with him. Verse 2, Mahanaim means 2 camps. Maybe there were 2 armies of angels. But we do not know why there would be 2 armies. Or maybe 2 camps meant Jacob's camp and the angels' camp. Afterwards, Jacob separated his own camp into 2 camps. Verse 7. Verse 3, the region was called Seir. Seir is like the Hebrew word for hairy. The country was called Edom. Edom is like the Hebrew word for red. And Esau had red skin, because he was outdoors so much. Esau was a good hunter and he liked to be outdoors. Genesis 25:27. So, because of the name Edom, people could easily remember who Esau was. Verses 4-5, Jacob was trying to make sure that Esau was not angry. So several times Jacob called Esau my lord, and Jacob called himself your servant. This was the usual way for a younger brother to speak to his older brother. Jacob used these words to show that he respected Esau. Verse 6, the writer shows to us that Jacob was afraid. Esau had brought 400 men, without cattle and children. That was an army that Jacob might easily be afraid of. Jacob had servants and some of his sons were young men. But Jacob's group were much too small and too weak to fight Esau's men. Verses 7-8, Jacob separated his family, servants, and animals into two groups. If Esau attacked one group, the other group would run away. Verse 9, Jacob prayed and he prepared. God expects us to do both. God has done good things in the past for us. It is good to say such things when we pray. It helps us to remember what God has done. And it shows to God that we are grateful. We are grateful for what He has done for us. Verse 10, when Jacob left home, he had only his stick. But when he came back, he had a family. He had many servants and animals also. Verses 11-12, Jacob said the right things in his prayer. But he was not yet ready to trust God. Jacob was still trying to use clever schemes to protect himself. He knew that God had promised to look after him. But Jacob thought that he would have to save himself by his own schemes. Verse 13, Jacob made ready a very large present for Esau. Verses 14-21, Jacob's scheme was to send several separate gifts to Esau. Jacob thought that Esau would perhaps still be angry after the first gift. But Esau would be less angry after the second gift. In the end, Esau would receive many such gifts, even before he met Jacob. Verses 22-24, the writer does not tell us why Jacob stayed behind alone. Perhaps Jacob realized that he needed to pray more. Jacob did not want anyone to disturb him as he prayed. He needed to spend time alone with God. We do not know why God's man fought with Jacob. The man was probably an angel. But we do know why Jacob continued to struggle with the man. Jacob wanted to receive God's blessing. Verse 26. It would have been difficult to fight in the dark. Verse 25, the man was much stronger than Jacob was. The man hurt Jacob badly when he merely touched Jacob. Afterwards, Jacob could not walk well. Verse 31. Verse 26, Jacob did not want to fight for nothing. He wanted God's blessing. Jacob always believed that God's blessing was very important. Jacob would do anything to get God's blessing. Verse 27, Israel means God struggles. Or it means he who struggles with God. Jacob had to struggle that night as he prayed. But Jacob overcame. So, Jacob's name changed to Israel, although we still call him Jacob. And Jacob's character also changed. Jacob did not continue to use schemes. Instead, he learned to trust God more. Verse 30, Peniel means God's face. In verse 31, the Hebrew text has Penuel. It is another way to say the same name. God is very holy. At that time, if people saw God, they did not usually stay alive. The verse might also mean this: Jacob knew that God was keeping him alive. That was because God had blessed him. Verse 31, God sometimes makes us weak in some way. That makes us trust Him for His strength. In 2 Corinthians 12:9, Paul wrote, "The Lord said to me, my grace kindness is enough for you. When you are weak, then my power becomes perfect in you." So I am very happy to talk proudly about my weaknesses. Then Christ's power can live in me. Look also at the verse after that, 2 Corinthians 12:10. Genesis 33. Jacob meets Esau. Jacob looked up. He saw Esau with 400 men coming towards him. So he separated his children into groups. Some went with Leah, some went with Rachel, and some went with his 2 female servants. He put his female servants and their children at the front of the group. Then came Leah and her children. But Jacob put his son Joseph with Rachel at the back of the group. Jacob himself went in front of these groups. He bent down to the ground to respect Esau. He did this 7 times as he came nearer to his brother. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and he hugged him. He put his arms round Jacob's neck and he kissed him. They both wept. Then Esau looked up. He saw the women and children. He asked, "Who are these people with you?" Jacob replied, "They are the children that God has given to me, your servant." At last, it was time to meet Esau. Jacob had been very afraid about this meeting. Jacob's body was weaker because of his experience when he struggled with the angel. But Jacob probably felt stronger, because he now had God's blessing. Jacob led his family as they approached Esau. But Esau was not angry. In fact, he was kind to Jacob. Esau did not even want to accept Jacob's gifts. But Jacob insisted that Esau should accept them. Jacob stayed in Canaan. He bought some land near a city called Shechem. He prayed there. And nobody opposed him. But there would soon be more troubles. Notes on the verses. Verse 1: Jacob had a lot of time to wait for Esau. Jacob had time to arrange his people and animals in order. He had fought all night with the man, God's man. Jacob was afraid to meet Esau. So, Jacob needed the strength that God gave to him. Esau still had 400 men with him. Jacob himself had an injury. He did not have 400 men. The men that he had were not able to fight. They had to take care of the animals. And they were probably tired after the long journey. Verse 2: It was the custom to arrange sons in the order of their age. Genesis 43:33. This would usually be the same order as their importance in the family. 1 Samuel 16:6-11. But Jacob arranged his sons in the order of the importance of their mothers. Jacob probably did not realize that he had given the most important place to Joseph. Joseph was Jacob's youngest son at this time. But Joseph was the son of Jacob's favorite wife. Verse 3: Jacob showed that he had come in peace. He wanted to be friends with Esau. And he was careful to show it. He was willing to be humble. He did not want to get things from other people. He was content, because God was blessing him. Verses 4-11: Esau was not still angry. He, too, was content. He did not even want to take Jacob's gifts. They were both happy to be together. Verses 12-17: Jacob wanted to go to the country that God had promised. So he did not want to go to Seir, where Esau lived. We do not know why Jacob built a house at Sukkah. Sukkah means shelters. That is, simple shelters. The people and animals probably needed a rest after the long journey. Maybe they did not stay there for a long time. However, we do not know how long they actually stayed there. Verses 18-19: Jacob wanted to have a calm life. These verses are like Genesis 21:33-34 and Genesis 26:25. Both Abraham and Isaac found quiet places where they could live. These places were calm and Abraham and Isaac were able to pray there. Jacob hoped that he had arrived at such a place. Verse 20: El Elohi Israel means God is Israel's, Jacob's God. Jacob remembered that Jacob had promised this. Genesis 28:21. He had promised that God would be his God. And now, God had brought him safely back to Canaan. Then the female servants and their children came to Esau. As they came near to him, they bent down to the ground. Then Leah and her children came and they bent down in front of Esau. Last of all, Joseph and Rachel came to Esau and they also bent down to the ground. Esau asked Jacob, "Why did you send all those animals in front of you?" Jacob replied, "So that you would be happy to see me, my lord." But Esau said, "Keep your animals for yourself, my brother. I have enough animals of my own." But Jacob replied, "No. If you are happy to see me, please accept these animals as a gift from me. When you met me and I saw your face, it was like I saw the face of God himself. I am happy that you have met me as a friend. So please accept the gift that I brought to you. God has been very kind to me so that I have everything that I need." So Esau accepted the gifts because Jacob would not agree to keep them. Then Esau said, "Let us continue to go on our way. I will travel with you." But Jacob said, "My lord, the children are not very strong. Many of the animals have young babies. If we go too far in one day, then all the animals will die. So you should go in front of me, my lord. I will travel slowly with the animals and children, so that they are comfortable. Then, my lord, I will come to you in Seir." Esau said, "Then let me leave some of my men to travel with you." But Jacob replied, "You do not need to do that. All I want is for you to be happy with me." So Esau began his journey back to Seir that same day. But Jacob went to Sukkah instead. He built a house for himself, and he made huts for his animals. That is why the place is called Sukkah. Sukkah means huts. After Jacob left Paddan Aram, he traveled safely to Canaan. He put up his tents there, near the city of Shechem. He bought the piece of ground where he had put up his tents. He paid pieces of silver to Hamor's sons to buy the land. Hamor was the father of Shechem. Genesis 34. Dinah. Dinah was the daughter of Leah and Jacob. One day she went out to visit the young women who lived near Shechem city. Hamor the Hivite ruled that region. When his son, Shechem, saw Dinah, he took hold of her. Dinah could not get free and Shechem had sex with her. He liked Dinah very much. He loved her. He spoke kind words to her so that she would love him too. Shechem said to his father, "Hamor, I want to marry this girl. Please get her for me." Jacob heard that Shechem had had sex with his daughter. At that time, Jacob's sons were taking care of his animals in the fields. So he did not do anything until his sons came home. Shechem's father, Hamor, went to talk to Jacob about Dinah. Jacob's sons now heard what had happened and they came home from the fields. They were very angry because Shechem had done such a bad thing. When he caught Dinah and had sex with her, he had brought shame on Jacob's family. It was a bad thing that nobody should ever do. Hamor said to Jacob and his sons, "My son Shechem loves your daughter. Please give her to him so that she can be his wife. There should be more marriages between your people and our people. Our men should marry your daughters and our daughters should become wives for your men. Then you can live among us. You can live anywhere you want to in this land. You should live here, buy and sell things. Buy land and houses here." Hamor wanted the Hivites to have some of Jacob's riches. Then Shechem said to Dinah's father and brothers, "I would like to make you happy. So ask me for whatever you want and I will give it to you. I will pay you the gifts that you ask for Dinah. It can be as much as you like. I will pay it all, because I want to have Dinah as my wife." Because of the bad thing that Shechem had done to Dinah, Jacob's sons decided to deceive him. And they deceived his father Hamor too. They said, "We cannot give our sister to a man who has not been circumcised. We would be ashamed to do this. If you want to marry Dinah, you must do one thing. You must circumcise all your males. Then you will become like us and we will agree for you to marry Dinah. Then we will give you our daughters so that your men can marry them. And our men will marry your daughters. We will live among you, so that we become one people with you. But your men must agree to be circumcised. If not, we will take our sister with us and we will leave this place." This idea seemed good to Hamor and his son Shechem. Shechem's family respected him as an important person. So, he and his father quickly did what Jacob's sons told them. Shechem agreed to do it because he wanted very much to marry Dinah. So Hamor and his son Shechem went to the gate of the city. They spoke to their men there. They said, Jacob's family are our friends. Let them live in our land, and buy and sell things. This land is big enough for them and us. We can marry their daughters, and they can marry our daughters. But we must do the one thing that they have asked us to do. We must circumcise all our males in the same way that they do. If we do that, they will agree to live among us. Then their things and their animals will all become our things. So we should agree to be circumcised, as they ask. Then they will live among us. All the men who were at the city gate agreed with Hamor and Shechem. So every male in the city was circumcised. 3 days after the men were circumcised, they still had a lot of pain. Then 2 of Jacob's sons attacked Shechem's men with their swords. None of the men were prepared to fight. Jacob's 2 sons were Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers. They killed every male in the city. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem. Then they took Dinah from Shechem's house and they left. The men in the city could not fight against Simeon and Levi. They had too much pain. Jacob's other sons also saw that the men of the city were dead. So they took everything that they wanted from the city. They did that because it was the place where Shechem had done a very bad thing against their sister. They took all the sheep, goats, cows, and donkeys. They took everything that was in the city and in the fields near there. They carried away every valuable thing for themselves. They also took all the men's wives and their children. They took everything from the houses in the city. When they returned to Jacob, he said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought bad trouble to me. The people who live in this land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites, will hate me. I will be like a bad smell to them. We do not have many men to fight for us. If the Perizzites and Canaanites join together and they attack us, they will destroy our whole family." But Simeon and Levi replied, "Shechem should not have had sex with our sister as if she were a prostitute." Jacob built an altar in that place. He called the altar, "The God of Israel is the true God." Jacob served the real God, Genesis 34:20. But Jacob's family did not. They used asterisk idols, which were images of false gods, Genesis 35:2. And they were not behaving in the same manner as people who serve the real God. This became a very serious matter when a man called Shechem raped Dinah. Dinah was the daughter of Jacob and Leah. Simeon and Levi were brothers of Dinah. They became very angry when they heard about Shechem. They made a cruel plot. They pretended that Shechem could marry Dinah. But first, Shechem would have to accept circumcision. And they wanted every male in Shechem's town to accept circumcision. Shechem's town was called Shechem 2, Genesis 12:6. The men agreed. But while the men were still hurting, Simeon and Levi attacked them. Simeon and Levi killed every man in the town, including Shechem. Jacob was very unhappy about the behavior of Simeon and Levi. They had acted in the same manner as very wicked people behave. Shechem deserved punishment. But the actions of Simeon and Levi were much too cruel. And now, Jacob's whole family was in danger. Before he died, Jacob blessed his sons. But he did not bless Simeon or Levi. Instead, he said that their anger was terrible. So, God would scatter their descendants across the country called Israel, Genesis 49:5-7. Notes on the verses. Verse 1, we do not know whether Dinah had sisters. People often made lists that showed members in a family. See Genesis 29:31-35, 30:1-24. But such a list did not include girls, unless there was a special reason for that. Maybe Dinah should not have gone out to visit those people. Maybe that was dangerous. Verse 2, at that time, people considered that sex between unmarried people was very seriously wrong. God says that this is wrong. There are laws about this in Deuteronomy 22:23-29. Verses 3-4, Shechem very much wanted to marry Dinah. We do not know whether Dinah wanted to marry Shechem. Verse 5. The report about Dinah probably upset Jacob greatly. But Jacob did not say anything. Perhaps he was too sad to speak about the matter. Perhaps he did not want to make any decisions while his sons were away. Perhaps he was being careful not to speak too quickly, in case his reaction was angry. So, Jacob waited. Verse 7 in * Hebrew, the writer says that Shechem had done a foolish thing in Israel. The word foolish can mean evil. In Israel may mean in Israel's family. That is Jacob's family, because Jacob was also called Israel. It may also mean that the writer was referring to the future nation called Israel. The nation called Israel would come from Israel's family. Verses 8 to 19. Hamor and Shechem were very polite. And Jacob and his sons were also very polite. However, Jacob's sons were telling lies about what they would do. And Shechem had not given Dinah back. Verses 8 to 9. God would give very clear rules about marriages between Israelites and other nations. Jacob and his family did not know these rules yet. But both Abraham and Isaac thought that their children should not marry anyone from Canaan. Verse 10. To trade may mean to move about. Merchants, traders were people that moved about. Verse 13. The brothers were angry because Shechem had raped their sister. It seems that he was still living with her. Verses 14 to 17. Jacob's sons were not respecting God. They were using circumcision for their own advantage. They were not using it to show a covenant with God. Jacob's sons wanted only to make the men in Shechem weak. The sons wanted to defeat and to kill those men. Verse 20. People usually discussed all the important things at the city's gate. Verses 21 to 23. Hamor and Shechem were clever. They told the men in their city that the Israelites' wealth would come to the city. Actually, Hamor had invited the Israelites to have land in the city. But Hamor and Shechem did not tell that to the men in the city. The reason for all that was so that Shechem could marry Dinah, the Israelite woman. But Hamor and Shechem did not say the reason. The writer writes about men that went out of the gate. It probably means healthy, skillful men that could fight. Such men could also work in the fields. Verse 25. Simeon and Levi punished the men in Shechem too severely. The brothers were very cruel. Verse 26. Simeon and Levi took Dinah away. In the meantime, Dinah had been with Shechem all the time. That was another reason why her brothers were so angry. Simeon and Levi may have had other men with them. But in a surprise attack, it was sometimes better to have only a few men. Verses 27 to 29. After Simeon and Levi killed the men, Jacob's sons took everything away from the city. They took all the possessions that had belonged to the dead men. And they kept these things for themselves. They also took the women and children to be their slaves. So, Jacob's sons became wealthy. But they became wealthy because of Simeon and Levi's cruelty. Verses 30 to 31. The behavior of Jacob's sons upset Jacob greatly. He realized that other people would oppose him because of his sons' actions. Now, his sons had become wealthy and powerful. And Jacob had learned that he could not control them. God had promised to make Jacob's descendants into a great nation. But Jacob did not want that nation to be a wicked nation. So, Jacob needed to teach his sons about God. Genesis 35:1-15. Nobody in the story was innocent. Dinah went out to visit those people. That was a dangerous thing to do. Hamor and Shechem did something wrong to her. And they were not honest with Jacob's family about it. Hamor and Shechem were not honest with their own people either. Jacob probably should have done more about Dinah's situation. But he was perhaps more worried about his own safety among his neighbors. But the behavior of Simeon and Levi was terrible. The brothers punished the men in Shechem too severely. They were cruel.